Morning folks, Kevin here. Well, it's August 1st, 2018, and today I thought I'd do another episode of Ask Me Anything. For those of you who don't know, what I try to do is create little videos every once in a while as soon as I get enough comments and questions and I have the time to sit down and respond to the comments and questions via a video like this, as opposed to typing out the comments the way a good video creator would be doing. I'm just a bad content creator. Unfortunately, I don't take the time to do it. I'm a bit overwhelmed here, taking care of everything that I've got to do this time of year. So anyways, without belaboring things, the most recent comment was from Shirley Bumbelow regarding composting weed series. I think it's August 7th, 2017. Thank you, and a little green heart. Thank you very much, Shirley. I appreciate it. If there's comments and questions, it seems like the composting series seems to be one of the more popular, that and the solar videos. So the more likes or comments that I get about various topics that I'm covering, probably the more that I'll try to create more content about those subjects as well. Tim's Homestead commented on a recent video, on the video that I recently published covering the black rot on the Concord grapevines. Tim wrote, "I'm glad you shared this one about the grapes. I have only a few grapevines and they are struggling. The grapes are turning black also. I used to have very nice grapes harvest, but in the past few years I have not. The Japanese beetles really take a toll on them, as well as it's like swimming against the current. Also here in Ohio, we get more and more rain each year, which is not good for the many types of plants that he's growing." So again, black rot is a fungal disease. It proliferates during times of high humidity and heat. The spores are ubiquitous. They're every place. They can affect a variety of different species, and they're our plum trees, peach trees, nectarines are certainly susceptible. Some cultivars are more susceptible than others. I have the black rot on two different cultivars, the Concord grapes and a green grape. And what I'll do is I'll try and make a video right after I get done with this one, talking about the growing structures. And one of the reasons that I think covering growing structures for vining species like grapevines and the various trellising systems that we use for some of our other berry plants as well, like our raspberries or blackberries, I think choosing the most appropriate one for the context of how you're dealing with things really allows us to be more effective and timely. And so through observation and interaction, a permaculture principle that's really, really important, getting out there and being able to observe a problem during its during the very earliest symptoms or clinical signs that we see that there's a disease process going on, maybe photographing it, taking notes, that sort of thing. Another thing that I think is really beneficial, like we have a couple of weather stations here on site, and if we look at, like it's in permaculture, when we are looking at a geographic location, the climate, and we would look at the historical records of the area around here, like there's an airport just a few miles from us. There's several different weather stations around us. But the truth is, if I were to follow those records, it'd be completely off for where we are on our property, even though they surround us on all four sides of us, north, south, east, and west. So it's very inaccurate and imprecise, both of those, to be able to determine what the cumulative or the climate has actually been producing here on our property. And as I've talked before, with having a couple of weather stations on site, we can see the differences that some of the structures on site have an impact as well. So by having, and the reason I'm mentioning this is being able to maintain good, accurate records and saying, geez, this is when I first noticed this disease process going on, I immediately went back and looked at what our humidity has been for the last 5.5 weeks. And the humidity was or our dew point, looking at those two factors. Not looking at rain, because rain isn't necessarily associated with fungal disease development. You can have very high dew points or humidity, and the heat have a high temperature. Those factors are likely more predictive than the rain accumulation. Now, I'm sort of rambling here, so I apologize for that. But those are things I would think about. One other thing, Tim, you mentioned the Japanese beetles, and I remember visiting your YouTube channel, which is a good channel, a good homesteading permaculture, beginning permaculture site. One of the things I noticed, you had those Japanese beetle traps that are used, the mechanism that they use is using pheromones, bringing in the Japanese beetles. It's like it's an attractant, bringing the Japanese beetles. So if you have the traps close to the places that you want the Japanese beetles to avoid, you're working against yourself. So and years ago we used this, so I had many more Japanese beetle problems when I used those traps. If I were to use those traps, I'd put them in locations where I'm not growing any plants, areas that I want to draw them away from our gardens, away from our grapevines and all. The other thing that you can do is choose the plant species to be the things that I want next to the produce that I'm growing or the grapevines that I'm growing that the beetles would be attacking. I'd want to have a preferential plant. So the plants that the Japanese beetles will want to attack before they attack your other plants on your site. So for example, the Pennsylvania smartweed, and I don't know the Latin name for it. I tried to memorize it before, but as I was trying to memorize so many different Latin names for so many different species. But anyways, the Pennsylvania smartweed, and if you have questions about that, I'll make sure to make a video about the Pennsylvania smartweed. It's one of the weeds that I try not to pull all of them out, because it's the sentinel plant. I can tell when the Japanese beetles are coming here because they'll go to those plants first. And any plants that I know that they want to be near, I want to have more of those Japanese beetle those Pennsylvania smartweed plants near it, because the Japanese beetles will go to that first. And I can just go out there when I'm doing my morning walk, just go around and crush a whole bunch of them and know that I'm going to want more of those Pennsylvania smartweed plants right in that location. So I hope that was somewhat beneficial, Tim. And thank you very much for your continued input on the channel. It adds to our community. Rick Hotels commented on the how to size your solar panels, and I think that was a couple of years. Very good presentation. Thank you, Rick. I appreciate it. Hound Life commented on a video. Great video. We have had 1.3 feet of rain since last Saturday. It stinks because a lot of our squash plants are starting to die out. More rain is coming this week. I think next year we are going to do everything in plastic culture, meaning like putting it in plastic pots. I've never had as great a success growing it in the plastic structures, although you'll see I have many of my perennial plants in plastic pots, and my figs I actually have in the plastic pots, but I find that the roots, unless they're really huge pots and they're stationary and I don't worry about them overwintering, but like the figs I try to bring them in because otherwise they'll die right down to the root and all, and it takes them more time to come back and I don't get as many figs. It's like here, I decided to modify our gardens here to create gardens where there were no gardens in the past. And this is all gravel bed in this area here, so you see me doing all this composting, all the wood chips and all. But one of the things I recognized right off the bat was the slope of the land. Now when I say slope, I'm talking about, I'm not talking about a really steep necessarily slope, or you know, so you can have anything from a level, and I'm going to use the word level and flat, and they're not the same. So you can have a flat, steep slope, And that means that the surface of it is flat. There's no undulations, there's no divots, there's no little pooling sections, there's no mounds sticking up. So having flat with a slight slope is really important. And often I'll hear people recommend either planting your gardens either in a north-south or east-west direction, so you get appropriate sun exposure and all. And certainly positioning your plants, like there's some plants that do better with not getting that afternoon western sun. The main thing I would say is having a nice slope to your garden beds is probably important. And if we live in a part of the country, and we live in a part of the country that we get these we have long winters that with lots of snow accumulation, with lots of runoff and melting of that snow in the springtime, and we used to have more rain during the summertime as well. So having permanent raised beds really was beneficial. And now our property goes on a slope going, the highest part of the property is in the northeastern part of the property, and the property goes gradually towards the southwest. But our gardens, our vegetable gardens, our kitchen gardens, are not oriented that way. I tried to level them going from east to west, take away so much of the slope going that way. There still is a slight slope going towards the west, but I build up the west side of the garden beds. However, what I did do, I maintain the pitch going to the south. And now you see that our beds are oriented north and south, not because of solar exposure, but because what I want to do is have the permanent raised beds, the paths in between the beds, to be able to, when we get excessive rain or water, the water will go down into the paths between the beds, the permanent raised beds, and go off into our other systems, whether it's our canal systems or going into our swale systems and all here on site. So if you have the ability with your property to take a close look and say, geez, how does our property slope, or is it completely level? If it's completely level, then sometimes digging in or building raised beds on the sides. And if you have to do the plastic culture, well, then do that. I'm just always trying to get to the point where if I need to put something up, either I'll try to use blocks or, and I've used stones before, but you get more weeds around the stones as well, and they're a little bit more challenging unless you've got nice flat stones that you can do good creations with, or using wood raised beds, those sorts of things. I think the plants do better. At least that's been my observation over time. But anyways, I thank you so much, Hound Life. You're also contributing regularly, and I appreciate it. Thank you. Doug Kuykendall, I apologize, I'm terrible at pronouncing names. This is in response to a video I created 1 or 2 years ago about soil and plant and succession, how the soil microbiome changes as time goes on, as we go from, like with the hugelkultur pits that we did here, one of the videos I made, we go from it's just straight gravel, then the weeds populate the area, and then we can take that soil and gradually see how it matures, and we go from bacterial dominated to more fungal integration into the site as there's more carbon sources, and then we have the various nematodes, and then the microarthropods and the protozoa as well, and we get these full soil food webs that are appropriate, that support the plant species that are there. But if we start off and we see our garden beds have lots of weeds in them, chances are we have a bacterial dominated soil. And I think that's what Doug's question was about. Let me get to that. I understand succession. I studied range and wildlife habitat management, a world of new knowledge since I graduated in 1977. My question, I have high bacterial population, parenthetically weeds, and obviously need to increase fungal populations. I have a lot of grass, even in a moderate drought. We practice holistic resource management and planned grazing, parenthetically Allen Savory, and the pastures are continually improving. But I wish to speed things up. Do I have to build up more carbon before spraying compost tea that is more fungally dominated, or is it a waste of time and energy if there isn't sufficient carbon already present? Well, that's a fantastic question, Doug. So first let me say, studying soil science, I've only been doing this for a few years. In my prior profession, microscopy, using a microscope, a light microscope, was something I utilize every single day. But that's in veterinary medicine as an internist. I'd be looking at cytology, histology. We'd be looking at anything from fine needle aspirates, bacterial cultures, results. We'd be looking at the various components in bodily fluids, CSF fluid, bodily tissues. And so I'm very comfortable with microscopy. However, I'd say that contacting Elaine Ingham, she is a well-known in the permaculture circles for her knowledge and contributions to soil microbiology. And she offers several courses on that subject matter as well. However, I will tell you, one of the things that became crystal clear to me during my latter years of practicing medicine was the importance of understanding the microbiome within the digestive system or other body systems. And we have microbiomes all over our body. But within the digestive system, there have been many peer-reviewed scientific papers that have clearly demonstrated that by changing one's diet, in other words, the amount of fiber in the diet, almost magically or immediately changes the microorganisms within the digestive system. So if we examine fecal samples from patients that are switched from, let's say, the standard American diet where they're eating fast food, French fries, hamburgers, hot dogs, those sorts of things, and we do a fecal sample, and then they switch their diet to incorporating, say, more fiber in their diet, whether it's leafy greens or whatever. Within a short time at all, we can see both qualitative and quantitative. So the relative numbers of the microorganisms, even microorganisms that weren't detected in the initial fecal samples, are detectable. Now again, it's not to say that those microorganisms weren't there initially. It's to say that there wasn't enough of them to detect with the sensitivity of the testing that was used. And I don't want to get into all the science behind that. But my point is this, is I believe that the soil microbiomes, wherever it is on our property, if we're using an inoculum that's inoculating the soil where there isn't the food source there. So let's use, instead of using the word inoculum, I'll use probiotic. So it's living microorganisms, whether you're using compost tea or compost or whatever it is. If those microorganisms don't have the food sources there, there's no way, at least this is my belief, I don't know this for certain with the soil. Based on what I've done so far, this is true. But there's just no way for those microorganisms to multiply and to proceed with the succession that you desire. The microorganisms are going to have a transient impact, but once their food sources are out, without the prebiotics, meaning the appropriate nutrients for those microorganisms, they aren't going to do as well. I hope this makes sense. So most people are familiar with probiotics, that's the living organisms. The prebiotics are those food sources that the probiotics would use. So an example of a probiotic would be the compost tea. Now there are some prebiotics mixed in a compost tea sample because you're really concentrating the high numbers. You're basically putting the right microenvironment in that in the system that you're using, whether you're using a centrifugal system, or you're using oxygen, using air bubblers and all, if you got that the populations up, chances are they've really consumed a lot of their nutrient resources in getting the population numbers up. So when you put that on the soil, my thought is, well, it might be a significant waste unless there's already enough carbon in your soil. So increasing the amount of carbon. Now here you can see I'm using everything from weeds, and also you could use straw, you could use if you're using the an Allen savory system, you may want to just go ahead and have someone come through and clip a lot of the grasses. Once it turns brown, then that's going to be a higher carbon source. Certainly leaves, when they fall off in the fall time, that's a higher carbon source. Wood chips, cardboard, all of those materials. So so the short answer is yes, I think that it isn't going to be, you're not going to get the return on your investment by putting all that compost tea out there. Now the compost tea, depending on what microorganisms there are, there's microorganisms that can benefit the surface of the plant, the leaf surface. So we want to colonize all of those areas. And so depending on how you're making your compost tea and what plant species you're trying to affect, certainly that misting that around the trees or the plant species that you have will be beneficial, but will it have that long lasting and really start that succession? Because when we're talking about succession, we're talking about changing the relative numbers quantitatively of the different progressing to different species being in those environments. I hope that made sense. So if you have more comments and questions, please leave them below. I appreciate it. NCal. Oh, here's one. Oh, so sometimes I get a thumbs down, and it breaks my heart, but I'll survive. But NCal, K-E-L, left a good comment for me. So this was in regards to what is this video? Composting. Oh, the composting weed series on August 7th, 2017. Up to 2 minutes and 10 seconds, you are still rambling, so thumbs down. Quit being word wasteful. Now, if you've been following the videos that I produce, I am somewhat wasteful and tend to babble, and I'm always thinking to myself how far to go with explanations, because I can bore even someone who's very interested in subject matters with my details at times. So I try to control that. But I gotta say, NCal, I appreciate you. If you're going to leave me a thumbs down, leave me a reason why, so that I view this as constructive criticism, and hopefully I'll be able to improve. I should be doing more editing with my videos than I do, but I don't. So it looks like this video is getting quite long because my camera just shut off for me. So I think I'll stop the video right here. I really do look forward to your contributions to the community by, giving thumbs up. If you give a thumbs down, let me know what I could be doing better. Certainly leaving comments and asking questions, I think, is very beneficial for all of us, because the questions or comments that you're leaving may very well trigger a thought process in another viewer later on and may be beneficial. I know that sort of thing has worked for me in the past as well. So again, thank you so much for your contributions to this channel. It really inspires me to be more creative and put out more videos, and to try and improve the content of the videos that I am creating. So thanks so much for watching, folks. If this was of value, please give it a thumbs up. Be sure to leave comments and questions. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Hit that bell icon if you want to be notified when we post more videos. And by all means, have a fantastic day, folks. Bye-bye now.